welcome to another episode of Disaster Empire. I am so excited that you are here, and I have another great guest for you. This is Terry Lee. Terry, thank you so much for jumping on and joining us on the podcast.
Hi, Ashley. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Excellent. Now, today we're going to be talking about vendor management and risk. I really want to jump right in because this is a hot topic, and I know that our audience is always looking to hear various perspectives on risk and vendor management, something that we're definitely leaning into in the industry, really understanding risk and obviously working with our vendors, as so many of us are really offshoring services to our vendors. So talk to me about the importance of vendor management and risk to resilience.
I think it's a really important topic, Ashley. The role of the business continuity manager has changed over the last 10 years. It used to be more focused on planning and plan production and testing and exercising, but as businesses became more risky, if you will, they have to wear multiple hats. Now, that doesn't mean they are the vendor risk manager, but the last Ponemon Institute study said 59% of breaches come through third-party vendors. And when it comes to continuity, it is the BCM manager who is looking at processes and assets and the business services and where those products and services are coming from. They have to wear a hat partially of a vendor risk manager and understand the reliance on those third-party vendors and be able to ascertain if a vendor is unable to provide a product or service, how does that disrupt their products, their services, and their business processes. So I think it's really become important. The critical services that support that organization's objectives, it's unavoidable. They're going to rely on third parties.
Absolutely. And so, Terry, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all my guests because it is a hot topic. What does resilience mean to you?
Resilience to me means the organization or even the individual's ability to withstand any type of a disruption. And when I present on this topic at conferences and in live events in particular, I'm typically talking to a room of business continuity professionals, and I ask them, whose role is it to ensure the resilience of the organization? And less than half of the room will raise their hands. And I argue that it is the business continuity professional's role to ensure the resilience of the organization because, it's about withstanding disruptions. And there's no one else in the organization tasked with disruption and recovery beyond business continuity in most cases. So it's all about being able to recover and adapt.
Now, you had a post on LinkedIn about the changing face of BCM and contingency management as it aligns with vendor risk. So I'd like to dive in a little bit more on that. Can you share with this audience what you think professionals really need to understand about that? And you shared a little bit about how it's changing. Can you dive a little bit deeper into what we need to be concerned about or what we should be really looking out for?
So my background is I've always been in the software field, but over the past 16, 17 years, I've been in the governance, risk, and compliance space, GRC, which includes business continuity management. And I was working for a large GRC software vendor, and I kind of had this personal epiphany that all this time and money the customers were spending on risk management, it was kind of a waste if there was a disruption or an incident and they couldn't recover. And that shifted my focus to business continuity management and disaster recovery. Up until that point, my focus had been enterprise risk, audit risk policy, in particular vendor risk management. So I saw these topics, at least in my head, coming together: vendor risk management, cyber risk, and business continuity. And I joined in 2016 a small BCM software company named Strategic BCP, owned and run by a guy named Frank Perlmutter. Frank's a super guy. And together, we really kind of brought together those disciplines, and we created a topic which at the time we called vendor continuity management, or VCM. And we started talking about it, writing about how the business continuity professional needed to be able to understand the impact of vendors, products, and services disappearing or being disrupted and how that would impact the rest of the business. And at first, I think when we talked about it at conferences, people were a little confused by it because they thought we were suggesting that business continuity professionals become the vendor risk professionals of the organization. But that actually wasn't what we were talking about. We were talking about how they had to be aware, had to incorporate it, had to assess in their BIAs what that impact would be, and have a partnership with the vendor risk team to really be able to have confidence in knowing if recovery was even possible, because so many of our critical processes these days rely on third-party vendors.
Terry, and I think that's such an important distinction and aspect of our work today. And to your point, I can say even for me as a practitioner, I've thought about risk assessment, thought about risk concerns with the BIA, bringing that to leadership's attention, really not leaning into risk, right? Really having that, I call that 360 view of understanding risk that I would say I have today. And really horizon scanning, if you will, or having good situational awareness on an ongoing basis about what are the external factors to an organization that really can impact it. And to your point, particularly the concerns on the vendor side, what could cause outages, understanding their capabilities, much more than I think we were ever looking at them in the past. There was just like, okay, we signed a contract, we told them they have to have BCP, right? And we're good, or DR.
Yeah.
And that's, that's not the case. So I think that was really ahead of the curve in starting to think about that and present it, even like when you said it wasn't something maybe on the minds of professionals when you first started to bring it forward. But I think that's a value, right, of working with our vendor partners like yourself, is that you get to have that ability to see like trends, what's going out in the market, because you're working with many customers and you have that ability to step back and really assess across the board, right? What should we be looking forward to? What's in the future of the work that we do? So I want to commend you for doing that. And just say, I think that's a value add to all of us out here.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I've always long believed that the business continuity profession is a cornerstone of risk management, although they've often been separated from each other. And I think long term, it has to be viewed as part of the same team. Otherwise, it's going to get pushed aside by other priorities, other disciplines. There's operational resilience standards now in the UK. DORA's coming out from the EU. CPS 230 has been released in Australia. The various standards in Canada, E21 and B10 are coming out as well. It's only a matter of time before there are operational resilience standards in the United States. And I think some BC professionals think that it's a replacement for what they do. And it's truly not. What we do in business continuity is foundational to operational resilience. It simply switches the focus from inward, how does this disruption affect our company, to outward, how does this disruption affect our customers, which I find only about 5% of the BC professionals are actually talking about impacts to customers other than the customers impacted, but actually trying to measure it, which is required in operational resilience standards. It's a whole other ballgame. And I think it's kind of the direction we're going.
Absolutely. And you and I agree wholeheartedly on that. And so, I want to touch on something that you were talking about before, which is business continuity planning. And I would say, and I think you would agree, that's not enough. As we're looking at vendor risk and vendor management, what would you suggest to professionals out there? How should we be planning with our third parties to really understand that risk and prepare for outages?
I think the biggest challenge that still remains is getting ahead of the vendor relationship challenges that occur when you're trying to do exercises with third-party vendors or even doing vendor risk assessments as part of a VRM team. And by get out ahead, I mean we need contracts and procurement to understand that there have to be clauses in our contracts and in our agreements with the third parties that require their participation and the production of evidence that they're doing the things that we need them to do. So it's not enough today to ask if a third-party vendor has a business continuity plan and do they conduct regular tests and exercises, because they're going to check the box and say yes. We need evidence. We need to know what the outcome of that last test or exercise was. Did they find any problems? And did they track those through remediation so that we know they are adapting and improving? I still believe having your critical vendors at the table during that tabletop exercise is super important. And I find that in conversations with BC professionals, it still seems to only happen about 10% of the time. And the biggest challenge there is it's not in the contract. The vendor isn't required to do it. And because they're going to be spending time doing it, they're not inclined to do it unless somebody's paying them to do it in many cases. So I think we need to change the culture so that the vendor realizes we're not engaging them to bash them over the head, but to make sure, because of our reliance on them, to make sure that they can actually withstand the disruption. And I think that starts in legal and contracts. It's got to be required.
And I definitely think the contracting piece is an important element, but I think building relationships with your third parties is also an important aspect. Do you agree?
Yeah, totally. So much of what we do, even today in third-party relationships, so much of it is simply based on trust. It's just based on trust and handshakes and the relationships between the two organizations. But to ensure resilience and demonstrate the ability to respond, you got to have more than trust in place.
And Terry, I could talk about this topic all day, and I think we could spend a few hours on it. Is there anything that you want to share with the audience that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about so far?
I'd love to talk about Protecht Group.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I can. So I work for an organization called Protecht Group. That's Protecht.
We'll link to it in the show notes too.
Fantastic! Thank you.
Absolutely.
Protecht Group is different in their perspective and approach to risk management, in that we have a concept of risk in motion, and that is that risk is always happening or not happening. And if you focus on the basics of things like risk assessments, attestations, key risk indicators, planning plausible scenarios, risk is risk is risk, and you should be able to withstand and deal with any type of an incident or any type of risk, provided you have consistency and a centralized source of information to work from. So the company's been around over 23 years. We have over 400 customers around the world and offices in Sydney, Los Angeles, and London. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, managing the North American operation. The entire team is here. We have a fantastic operational resilience solution that incorporates BCM as well. And I think everybody is a risk taker and should learn to embrace risk and seize opportunity.
Absolutely. So I'd say to the audience that please engage with Terry and his team if you want to learn more. Terry, what's the best way to contact you if people do want to engage?
You can always hit us up at protechtgroup.com, our website, but I'm on LinkedIn as well as Terrence P as in Paul Lee. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and you can always email me, terrence.lee@protechtgroup.com.
Awesome. So Terry, I'm going to ask you a leading question, because one of the reasons that I started to do this podcast and we really embrace talking to our vendors with Disaster Empire is because you are important partners in this work. And many of us need your support. I would say all of us need your support in order to do our work effectively on the day-to-day. So can you share a little bit more about Protecht and what makes your product stand out from the others? So that's a leading question.
It's okay. I'll take the lead. So what stands us apart is that we manage risk across the enterprise, regardless of the risk framework that the organization is doing. There's no special magic technology involved or required in good risk and compliance management. It's an all-in-one suite. It's always been SaaS hosted, which is really kind of interesting. When the company started in 1999 and the product was developed in 2001, it was cloud hosted from the very beginning, which was probably the first risk cloud product on the market. It's AWS hosted at data centers around the world. So the product is all in one. We don't modularize it and nickel and dime customers or anything like that. And I think probably the most telling factor is our customer retention. Our customer retention rate is over 99%. We have customers that have been with us for 18 years, and that's because they don't outgrow the product. It's a no-code platform. They can configure it on their own if they wish to. And so we continue to support them on their journey to show the product and talk about use cases and solutions if anybody's interested.
So if you're watching this out there, I hope that you check out Protecht. Follow Terry. That's something that I ask of this channel. If you can, please like, subscribe, and help to grow. And please follow our guests as well. They are definitely spending their time to join us and really share with you more about what they do, what they're thinking about in a thought leadership aspect or innovations that they're providing through the products they might provide. So Terry, I want to thank you so much for jumping on and sharing your thoughts as well as a bit more about Protecht. I think it's a great way to learn about products as well. Hey, as we wrap up, can you either share a little bit more about your background if you'd like, or hey, a fun fact, I see that you're a race fan.
Sure. So I am a Formula One fan. I got into Formula One a very long time ago, got married, had a family, got away from it, came back to it. And it was horribly depressing because most of the race car drivers that I followed they passed away or died in accidents. So I stepped away from it again. And then I came back to it about 10 years ago. This car behind me is the American Eagle Racer, which was the first American-built, American-driven Formula One car to win in Europe in 1967. So I've been a fan of Formula One for a long time. And I'm inspired by guys like drivers like Lewis Hamilton, who against all odds continues to demonstrate his resilience and excel in the sport.
Yeah, I would say that race car driving and being on a race car team is definitely an example of high levels of resilience. Definitely not an easy sport. None of them are, but not an easy sport to be a part of, and definitely a labor of love. Well, Terry, thank you so much for being here. Really enjoyed talking with you, and I hope we'll be able to have you back sometime.
Thank you very much, Ashley. It's great to see you. I love your podcast. I think you do fantastic work for the community, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you so much.